Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, On Screen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to On Screen, the official podcast of the Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today we are going to go over some news in our On Beat segment, and then we are going to cover the last 4 episodes of Justified City Primeval in full spoilers. Let's get started with On Beat. On Beat is, of course, our news segment. We have a few things to go over. Let's start out with some trailers that were released recently. First, we got a trailer for a movie called Mercy Road, which is kind of interesting because we've had bottle episodes of TV shows. This is like a bottle movie. It all takes place within a guy's car, at least from what we've seen in the trailer, as he's on a dark road that's barely illuminated, and it's all him, and then we just hear the voices of some other characters that he's talking to on the phone or something.
Yeah.
And that's
we might not even see those characters physically, you know?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe what we've seen is just the first act of the movie. And
well, they said everything you see is from the first 30 minutes.
There could be more that actually happens, but what we saw in the trailer was a guy in a car talking to himself, talking to people on the phone, and that's it.
I mean, it looks like a pretty intense thriller. I don't know.
It's just kind of interesting.
It's kind of like the less is more. Yeah, well, to me, it's heightened tension, right? Because, the less you see, the less you know, the more, it intentionally claustrophobic to increase the sense of paranoia and urgency.
To me, it feels like
very effective.
To me, it feels like it was a pandemic movie idea.
Yeah.
We only need the one guy. We can set up the cameras and in a fixed position, and then we can film him, and everybody can be really distanced from each other. It just kind of has that kind of vibe to me. I just saw a movie today. I'm not going to go in a whole bunch to talk about it, but there's some stuff that the way it's done in the movie made me think I could see where this might have been. Some of the stuff was filmed in a pandemic restriction sort of way. And this feels like they knew they were going to be restricted by the pandemic, and they decided to kind of get artistic about that.
Right, yeah, exactly.
That's what I take away from Mercy Road, at least. I don't know how it's going to end up being. Next, we got a trailer for The Killer. This is the next movie from David Fincher, and it's being done through Netflix. So it's going to have a short, a 1-month window in theaters, and then it's coming to Netflix. This is the continuation of Netflix's deal with Fincher that started with Mindhunter, I believe. No, I think he actually might have done something else for them before that. I don't know. But he definitely did Mindhunter with Netflix. And now he's doing this project, The Killer, stars Fassbender himself. And it looks like a Fincher movie.
Yeah, it does. It has that high quality bent to it, which I mean, it looks good. Looks fantastic.
It looks like it could be in the same line of the Game. It kind of has, it looks like it could kind of fit within that world almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Looks good. Fincher, always excited to see. Next, we got a new trailer, the last trailer, the launch trailer, you could say, for the One Piece series at Netflix, which will be out by the time this podcast is available. For us, we're recording this on Wednesday. It is about 4 hours out from this series being live, just over 4 hours out from the time that we're recording it, the podcast. So this is the best trailer yet by far, I think. I think the last few trailers, my biggest concern was that it really felt like this could end up being very cosplay-esque. And I've brought that up before, where it feels like the characters are kind of dressed up in costumes versus looking like they're wearing clothes that they could live in or something. It has that very you're at an anime convention and you just grabbed a bunch of people and put them in your back of your van and said, we're filming a One Piece movie right now.
Right, exactly.
It kind of had a little bit of that vibe to it. This is the first time where I feel like I've gotten a glimpse of the show's own personality.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't feel like they're just copying some scenes or something, but actually kind of feels like their own way of handling the material for the first time in this trailer.
for something like One Piece to work in live action, everything's gotta be stylized. Everything's gotta be exaggerated. And that's like every aspect of it, like the world itself, the ships, has to be exaggerated. It can't be like a bunch of people standing around and like what you said, like, you know, goofy looking cosplay, pretending like this is the real world. Like, you can't do it. It doesn't work. It's got to have its own logic to it. And from this trailer, it looks like they nailed that. Everything looks natural in motion.
Besides this trailer being really good, there was also, they did a screening in, I believe Santa Monica in California where they screened the first episode. And some reviewers have seen like, I think the whole season already. And it's pretty much been universal praise coming out of all critical sources, but also there were a lot of fans at the screenings in Santa Monica and same for them. So it's not just like high praise from critics or something, but it's high praise from critics and audiences that have seen it so far.
Yeah.
So that's encouraging. Very encouraging. There's also been a lot more talk even than before about Ichiro Oda, who is the creator of the One Piece series, being deeply involved in this series and like literally pulling some things off. Like there are things that were filmed for this series that he saw and said no, and they went and refilmed. So he's actually kind of exercising his control to make sure it works. And it looks like right now they are kind of following that guideline. So that's good news. That's like about the best news possible for something like this. As I've said before, One Piece as an animated live action adaptation is like probably about the highest bar you can get for like how hard something is to do. You know, doing One Piece as a live action series has got to be like, you could pick like any anime series and say, we're going to adapt this to live action. And you'd probably have better luck than doing One Piece because it's just so absurdist the way One Piece is done. You know, it's so absurd that the idea of like making that work in live action just feels almost impossible. And the fact that they're getting the kind of praise they're getting right now and how good this trailer came across, that's pretty crazy. They're clearing a really high bar if they're doing this right.
Yeah, exactly.
And lastly, speaking of pirates, we got a new trailer for season 2 of Our Flag Means Death. I mean, there's not a lot to say. It looks great. Our Flag Means Death was a great show. This looks like it's still going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the first season well enough. It didn't, like, blow me away or anything.
It's not as good as, like, What We Do in the Shadows or something, but it's...
Right, yeah.
It does something a little different. Like, it does something a little bit more, maybe heartfelt, I'd say, than what We Do in the Shadow is going for.
Yeah, yeah.
So, it's kind of like, it's not directly comparable, even though there is a somewhat similar sense of humor just because of who's making it. It still kind of like has its own thing going on. So I think it looks good. They're really playing up the whole like, you know, Blackbeard taking the breakup bad, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that'll be fun to watch. We're getting our fair share of pirate shows is what you can say about this.
We sure are.
That's it for our trailers though. We also there have been a bunch of cancellations and a few delays. One in particular we're going to talk about delay-wise that have happened probably mostly due to the strike, the ongoing SAG-AFTRA and WGA strike. We're going to start things off with The Peripheral and A League of Their Own, which were both canceled at Amazon. Those had already been picked up for second seasons, and now those second seasons have been reevaluated and canceled. I know The Peripheral is a very expensive show. It's actually really good. That's the one I'm sad about. A League of Their Own was okay. I watched some of that. It was okay, but like I could do without it. Like it doesn't bother me that it's gone, but The Peripheral, like that was actually pretty good. I think it's based on a novel by William Gibson, I believe, and it's like very cyberpunk genre, and it was done by Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy.
Oh, okay.
So The Peripheral was done by them, so it's got that kind of quality you'd expect from that. It was a really good show, so I'm sad that that's gone. That was canceled, believed to be because of the strike, and that's something we're going to be seeing as the strike continues on, that, you know, certain shows that we thought were safe are going to be canceled. This happened before with the pandemic. If you remember, Netflix canceled like 4 or 5 shows just because with the pandemic going on and with them not being able to film at like specific times, they would have had to have like paid the actors more to keep them on hold basically for when they would eventually be able to film. And so they canceled like 4 or 5 shows just because of that, because it suddenly became not worth it to them because of having to reschedule and secure the actors during that rescheduling.
Right, yeah.
So we've seen this kind of thing before, and now we're getting it immediately again with the strike now. It's kind of sad. Another show that was canceled is The Great, which was canceled after 3 seasons. I'm currently watching season 3. So there's something pretty dark that happened, and I just haven't gotten myself to go back to it since. I need to finish it, but it's a really good show. It's an extremely good show. I don't know how season 3 leaves off, and it still was just recently canceled just today as we're recording this, so there aren't a lot of details or speculation as to why. This could be another strike issue, or it could be something entirely different, or it could just be that they just didn't want to continue it. Like I said, I haven't seen the rest of season 3, so I don't know where they get to in the story at that point.
Right, yeah.
And then lastly, this is not a cancellation, but a delay, and almost assuredly because of the strike, it's like the worst kept secret, basically, is that Dune Part 2 has been delayed. It was going to come out at the end of the year. Now it's going to be coming out in March 2024. And the reason why this would be a strike delay, even though they've already filmed it and everything, it's already written, so they don't need the writers or the actors for the actual movie, is because of the promotion schedule. So in order to promote this movie, they need to have the actors available to go on talk shows and stuff like that, to go around the world and do, press events and stuff, and to promote it. And none of them can do that because they're on strike, and that goes against strike rules. So,
right, yeah, exactly.
So we're going to be seeing more of this.
So
we're going to be seeing more shows kind of scheduled for the later half of the year that are going to get pushed into next year because of this.
Yeah, it just says they hope the strike will be over by March so that they can have their actors promoting. But you know what would end the strike right away is paying your actors and writers fairly.
Yes. Yeah. I was talking to my mom about this in the car as we're driving back. I'm like, it's just stupid because they somehow think that the public's going to be on their side, or they're going to be able to starve out the actors and writers. Yeah. There's huge money going into the strike fund. So it's doesn't seem like you really have a good shot at making the writers and actors go homeless that they thought they were going to have. And public is pretty much universally on the side of the writers and actors as things are moving out. So it's like, you really don't have a leg to stand on. The studios, they don't have a leg to stand on in this thing. And it's just kind of stupid because they're just basically wasting billions of dollars in revenue as the strike continues on. They're losing so much money just because they can't accept the deal that they're eventually going to accept. It's not like they're not going to give the writers what they're asking for. They are. The writers have pretty much already won. It's just the producers coming to terms with it.
Yeah, exactly. Guess what? You won't have to delay movies if you make a fair deal with your writers and actors.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna we all know it's gonna happen anyways.
Yeah.
So just fucking do it,
Yeah, exactly.
Our next news story is that the Barbie movie has now become the highest grossing domestic movie in 2023 so far, beating out Super Mario Brothers. It has right now gotten to 596 million domestic. It is still at the theaters. Super Mario Brothers topped out at 574.8 million, and Super Mario Bros. Movie still holds global, which is at 1.36 billion compared to Barbie's 1.34 billion. But as I said, Barbie is still in theaters, so it's probably going to pass that at some point.
Congrats to Barbie.
Yep, Barbie's doing good. On top of that, it has also apparently beaten out Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 as Warner Brothers' highest grossing movie of all time. So yeah, Barbie movie did good. I've seen it. It's a good movie. There's one musical sequence that goes on about 3 times too long. Besides that, it's a great movie. I think Hollywood's going to take all the wrong lessons from it. And that's what I've heard, is that they're going to take the lesson that, hey, we can take all sorts of toys marketed to girls, make movies out of them, and they'll be huge hits. And the real lesson they should have taken is that they made a very subversive movie about a divisive product.
And that's why I think, trying to sequelize this won't be as successful as they think it will be.
But they're going to take the wrong lesson from it,
Yeah, because they already announced they're working on a fucking Polly Pocket movie with Amy Schumer. Anybody wants to watch that?
Yeah.
It's no.
Yeah, exactly. The reason this was successful is because it brought in the Barbie lovers and the Barbie haters and the people that were curious. And then you also got the whole Barbenheimer thing, which also increased
Barbie is one of like the most popular brands in the world. Same with Mario. That contributes to the reason that these movies reached the high they did, because like the brand appeal is everybody knows what Barbie is. Mm-hmm. Everybody does. And then when you couple that with a high quality movie, which is actually entertaining and has a good narrative, and is actually something like people can actually sit through and enjoy themselves, and not some like excruciating like toy commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Couple those together, then you have a recipe
written about it, because it's an interesting movie.
Success. That's the secret. And just making a sequel to like Barbie that is like, you can't do like the same message twice. You gotta do something different with it. And it's just like, I don't know. I think they're just gonna like say anything we make with the Barbie name is just gonna work. And then they're gonna do it with Polly Pocket now and Hot Wheels or things. It's like, these movies are like bombs in the making.
Yeah.
Because you don't,
It's like when they tried to make, what was it, Battleship, and they tried to make into like an alien sci-fi action movie.
Yes, I remember that.
Geez, like this is not a smart take.
No.
But yeah, like I said, Hollywood's gonna learn all their own lessons, and we'll be talking about that soon, I'm sure, as we start getting inundated with trailers for Bratz and Polly Pocket and all sorts of other garbage that isn't going to do well.
Yeah, exactly.
And then our last piece of news is that Sony has just raised the prices of all of their PlayStation Plus tiers. Their Essential tier, which is their baseline, has gone from $60 a year to $80 a year. Their Extra tier has gone from $100 a year to $135 a year. And their Premium tier has gone from $120 a year to $160 a year. So huge increases, and really no real information I've seen to justify it.
No justification, just like, this allows us to continue delivering great games and entertainment, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's so crappy.
I see they added the new Saints Row game to the PlayStation Plus, which is a very divisive, mostly hated game for the changes it made to the franchise. So if PlayStation Plus is going to be, here's the games that failed, and we're going to like re-release those for free to our subscribers, raising the price is not a good look if that's all they have to say about it.
These aren't small price increases, too. This isn't like $5 or $10. This is like $20 price increase at the base tier, and like a $40 at the premium tier. And here's the interesting thing. I think this is not just like a Sony problem. This is not just a PlayStation problem. We're seeing this more across the board with like, like even like stuff like Disney Plus is increasing prices. They recently announced. So this is kind of like generally what's happening with
services.
Exactly. Services, period. And an interesting thing is, yesterday it came out, GamesIndustry.biz did a report yesterday that indie publishers like Tiny Build and Devolver are having a more difficult time with their games on subscription services from, like, it points out, like, from Sony and Microsoft putting their games on Game Pass and PlayStation Plus, because Sony and Microsoft aren't writing as big checks as they used to for that content.
Mm-hmm.
They said the checks that like Sony and Microsoft are willing to write to help us subsidize these games to get them on the services are shrinking.
Yeah. There's also a lot of talk that's been going on about like Game Pass, for example.
Yeah.
And how the streaming aspect of Game Pass is costing Microsoft more for every time somebody actually plays on it than it ever brings in value.
Oh, yeah.
So it's losing money like crazy.
It's interesting to me, like, so it's clear that, like, they're cutting down on their spending, trying to save money by paying like less for content on the services, and on the same hand turning around to their customers and trying to squeeze them for more money.
We talked about this kind of basically, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, where we were talking about the Disney Plus thing and about how the quality of Disney Plus's shows has been plummeting. And then they're continuing to raise the price, and now they're going to start like cracking down on password sharing.
Well, it's funny because like they're raising the price, and they're also like getting rid of content, or not even like, it just came out yesterday that the Spiderwick Chronicles series will not be on Disney Plus, even though like the first season is already completed and it was ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
It was ready to be put on the service. Disney decided, no, actually we're not going to pay for that content.
I got 3 words for this whole situation.
Yeah.
And the person I'm addressing has nothing to do with Disney, and I still think they're at fault. My 3 words, fuck you, Zaslav.
Yeah, exactly.
You basically destroyed streaming.
Oh yeah, because he's the one that started like that trend of like, we can just like, we could just like get rid of stuff on the service, or we can just like scrap completed projects for like tax write-off purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just ruining streaming.
And now like Disney and others are like taking his lead on that.
Yeah. Fucking Zaslav.
So I'm just wondering, is the streaming bubble bursting? Or is I should say, is the subscriptions bubble bursting?
Maybe. I mean, there was so much talk when stuff started moving in that direction, when everything became more about services and subscriptions. I remember when that shift was happening and all the talk in the industry was happening. I mean, for example, Microsoft went from being like an OS and a software company from primarily marketing themselves as a services and subscriptions company.
Yeah.
And when they did that, and I'm not even just talking about gaming, I'm talking about
their
productivity, their operating system, everything.
Yeah.
And when that was happening, it was like a big deal. Like, okay, this is the future. We're moving towards that now. And like you said, are we at that point now where the service subscription model itself, is that bubble going to burst? And I think that some companies that people have looked at in the past and been like, oh yeah, this move, they're really going to screw themselves up. It's like, well, I think if they're the market leader, they can afford to make those kind of things. Like we said, Netflix is a company that can raise their prices every so often and that can do things like the password sharing crackdowns and stuff and still be okay. And why is that? Because they're fucking Netflix. Because they have so much content that and it's just such a constant deluge of content hitting that platform that they're just the market leader. They're the ones that you go to. But when other companies start fucking around with that stuff, it's like you might not have what's necessary to be doing this, you know? You might not have the value proposition to make this worthwhile. And they're going for it anyways. We talked about Disney Plus doing it, and now we're looking at Sony doing it. So it's a sad story. But hopefully things will shake out and we'll see the next phase of what's coming, and hopefully it's good. But who knows? That is it for our news segment, and that leaves only full spoilers. This week on Full Spoilers, we're going to be talking about the last 4 episodes of Justified City Primeval. That's Episode 5, You Good? Episode 6, Adios. Episode 7, The Smoking Gun. And Episode 8, The Question.
Yeah.
So I know you're a huge Justified fan, and you were super looking forward to this show, and you quite enjoyed the first 4 episodes that we talked about. Now, upon completion of this sequel series, what are your thoughts about Justified City Primeval?
It's complicated. I don't know. It's kind of meh. At the end of it,
just not enough shots of Clem and his patati whiteys.
I don't know. It's just some of what made Justified so good. Clement as a villain, the actor is good. The character has the charming bad boy thing down, but doesn't really go anywhere with that. He's not like Boyd. He's not a schemer, right?
Yeah. He's not as tied into everything, too. See, that was the thing with Boyd, is that Boyd was tied in so many different levels. It wasn't just here's what Boyd's doing and here's his little crew or something. It's no, he's connected to Raylan. He's connected to his sister-in-law that he ended up dating for a while. He's involved with her in the storyline. He's got the whole storyline with his father and his father's kind of crime, whatever, going on, and all the stuff with his family. And then you have the stuff with him with his church, in the first season, where he was going into went from white supremacy to church and the different kind of scams he was. He's tied into so many different levels of what's happening in the story. And here you have Clem. He's a similar character in the sense that he's just a fascinating villain, but he's just not really tied into anything besides the straightforward story that he's in.
Yeah.
He's not, he's no more deeply tied into anything than that. And they tried to tie him in more with Raylan in the first half, where we had where Raylan beat the shit out of him when he was coming after his daughter and the threats to his daughter. And so he had a dynamic being set up, they'd have some dynamic there between the two of them, and they didn't really pay that off.
Yeah, they didn't really, even then they don't really do any anything with that dynamic or that rivalry.
Yeah.
Because, like, Raylan and Clement have, like, such few interactions in the entire series. And that's our problem, too. Like, Raylan, for the most part, just feels like he's there. He's like...
He's just going through the motions?
It feels like more like he's a bystander most of the time to everything than, like, actually, like, moving the plot along.
The story seems to be, Raylan makes a move, everyone's like, oh man, you might be going too far with this move. Then Clem gets away, just walks away, like, no issues at all. And they're like, just tell Raylan, oops, sorry, guess we gotta let him go, nothing we could do. And then Raylan's, like, incredulous that this whole situation's happening in the first place.
Yeah.
And then rinse and repeat. That seems to be like the entire structure of this season.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they brought in the Albanian mafia as like, okay, this is gonna be something like now that they're involved, like that everything's gonna intensify. And then like it just seems like they forgot about that for a couple episodes.
Yeah, because, like, I think when we left off with our discussion on the podcast, it was, like, the episode where they introduced the Albanians. And I thought, I thought it was gonna start popping off, and, like, they just disappear for the next 2 episodes.
The last thing we saw was where the 2 people from the Albanian Mafia encountered Raylan and that one asshole police officer guy. And the asshole police officer guy ended up killing one of them.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the last thing we saw for the last time we discussed this.
And then they come back and, like, they're basically a non-factor.
Yeah.
They don't do anything.
Yep. That's the problem. I think maybe the problem is that the people that Justified was from these people making, what was Justified typically 13 episodes a season? And then this with like 8. So they just didn't have time to get into the dynamics. Like, what about the whole thing they set up? Like, maybe I just missed it. Maybe I'm just stupid and missed it. But they had like a scene where like in the last half of this season where they revealed that Sweetie's actually gay and that the guy that works with him at his bar is like his partner.
Yeah.
And it kind of came up like almost in a too subtle way. And then they hit it too hard. And then by the time that like clears in your head, like Sweetie's dead and that's all over. And it's like, okay, like, what was the point of even bringing that story up? Like, it's a point of character too. Yeah, it's a point where you can add an interesting wrinkle to Sweetie's character and develop it and do stuff, but they didn't do that. Like, they just brought up the base idea that they could have used as a jumping off point for more story, and then they didn't use it.
It seemed like when they were, like, giving him more development and stuff, they killed him off.
Yeah, like I said, it feels to me like they wanted to make a 13-episode season, and then they had to compress that down into an 8-episode season.
Yes.
That's what this feels like to me. Like, it feels like they set up character development and plot points and stuff that would reflect the 13-episode season, but then in doing an 8-episode season, they just ended up bringing up a bunch of stuff that went nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, what about, like they brought in a Mark...
X? That's nothing.
Like they brought in David Cross as a character.
Yes.
And they introduced him and they showed him kind of becoming like a mark for a scam. And then Clem steals his painting and then he hires a guy that's like ruthless as well that's going to stir up stuff. All that stuff's like over in like an episode.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the point? Like, what was the point of all of that?
Yeah. Cause that's where Clement kills the hitman and then kills Sweetie.
Yeah, like, what was the point of that? Like, if they had just skipped that entire storyline, could they have put more into the storyline about Sweetie and his partner and then really make an actually well-developed point in which Clem turns on Sweetie, rather than just, like, this quick nonsense?
Well, I mean, Clem turns on Sweetie because, like, it's obvious Sweetie just tried to have him killed.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, it felt like that was something that was coming, that was going to be a big thing, and then it just kind of passed like a whimper. And I'm wondering if they had cut the whole thing with David Cross's character and all that stuff, if they had completely excised that from the series, would that have given them enough time to actually pay off Sweetie's story in a better way?
Yeah.
And it's like, but they didn't, and I think it's like a time constraint issue.
Oh yeah, definitely. It also doesn't have the supporting cast that Justified had. There's no Tim in this or anything, or like, the chief who's like...
Yeah, all the police are like one-dimensional.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the supporting cast, obviously, like, Carolyn's great. she's three-dimensional. Like, Sweetie was great.
Yeah.
You know, but like, like
Raylan, Sweetie, Clem, and Caroline, and everybody else is, like, unnecessary.
Yeah. The cops are, like, really underdeveloped in this show.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it in the first half of the discussion.
Yeah.
That they brought in his daughter, and then she left, like, in the 4th episode or something, and it just felt completely pointless. Like, the only thing we got out of that was, like, Raylan being angry at Clem, and they didn't really make enough use of that, and then we don't even see Raylan's daughter again until, like, the end of the last episode.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just kind of like, what? It's like they were setting... I honestly think that they probably had their episode count cut on them. That they were originally planning to do more episodes. They were writing scripts with the plan of doing more episodes, and then the studio came down and said, actually, we're only going to let you do 8. And they went like, oh, shit. And then they ended up, we have these vestigial plot lines that never go anywhere because they had to be cut out, but there's still the traces of them. Like Raylan's daughter being in the series at all feels like a vestigial plot line. The story about Sweetie's
there's the
partner and everything feels like a vestigial plot line, you know? The whole David Cross storyline feels like a vestigial plot line, you know?
Yeah, and the whole plot line of, like, Maureen being dirty, you know? Yeah. Again, would have hit harder if they developed the character more and they actually, like, had the viewers, like, develop, like, some kind of attachment to her. Like, I know, like, they had her, like, hosting Raylan and his daughter in the first episode, but they didn't really do much with that character throughout it. I'm just thinking, if they had, thinking back to the original series with, like, Art, how well loved of a character he was. Can you imagine if, like, they did a twist where he was dirty? Like, that would have been bullshit, in my opinion. Glad that didn't happen, but, like, it would have induced an emotion, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And instead we just get, like, the one asshole cop going like, hey, I've, like, set people up for shit they haven't done, but those are all people that have done other things that I wasn't able to get them on.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not
it's just
that
kind of
much
a bit of an
asshole.
Kind of a bit of propaganda, but then at the same time, like, he's like, but I'm not going to send somebody up the river for something they had nothing to do with. So that ends up being the plot point where we find out Maureen being, like, really dirty and stuff. But like you said, we had no interest in be interested in her at all. If any of the police officers was to turn dirty where it might be a little bit interesting, it would be maybe Wendell, because he was actually, he wasn't an asshole, and he was, like, kind of on the right side there for most of it.
Yeah, he's the most likable of the cops in the show, you know.
But yeah, you know, like, it didn't work. Like we said, that's the problem with this series, is that there's lots of vestigial parts. Like, there's lots of parts that seems like they were there to set something up, and then they didn't do that, but they left those parts in.
This is adapting a story that in its original form had nothing to do with Raylan or his character. So, like, they're inserting Raylan into a story that didn't originally involve him.
Was Raylan not in City Primeval, the book?
From my understanding, it was like, he's not the central character. I think he has, like, a small part, if I heard correctly, but yeah, he's not the central character. Raymond Cruz is the central character in the story, and he shows up in an episode of this. Like, Raylan gets to meet him and interact with him, but then he's, like, gone from the series. But he was originally the central protagonist of the story.
What did you think about the little, like, either tease or closure moment they gave with, we suddenly cut to a prison in Kentucky?
Oh, you call that closure? That's like a cliffhanger ending. I'd love seeing Boyd again, and man, Walton Goggins, he just slips back into that character, like, you know, like he has
up the scenery entirely.
He hasn't stopped playing that character so seamlessly. Probably, like, one of the best segments of the entire series. Just seeing Boyd again and seeing him do his thing, just using his powers of manipulation to break himself out of prison, right?
Yeah.
The thing about the ending, though, and the thing about Boyd is, you're thinking, like, what does this really have to do with anything? Because, like, at the end of the show, in the last episode, Raylan kills Clement. He shoots him. It's funny because it's tense because Clement is, like, reaching into his pocket and knowing how dangerous he is. You think he's going to pull on Raylan, and he doesn't. It's like cassette tape, and Raylan's the one holding the gun, having shot three or so bullets into Clement, killing him. And then this leads to Raylan deciding to quit the Marshal Service and then just go back to Florida as a civilian.
I think it's that, but it's also throughout the season he was disillusioned with what was happening, with all the corruption, with the way that he just kept getting the walk, the fact that the result of everything here is just like a huge number of bodies that dropped. And I think that's kind of a big part of that, and just the fact that, you know, he realized that he was putting his family through shit that he didn't need to. And he just was like, okay, I'm done. And then it cuts back to, you know, we see Boyd, and Boyd escapes. And then it cuts to Raylan, and he's getting a phone call from, like, the Marshal's service. And the reason why I said it's either, like, closure or setup is that you could do it either way. You could do it one way in the sense is that you could say, okay, this could be set up for the next Justified series.
Yeah.
And it could be about Boyd.
It's the top spinning at the end of Inception, because it ends with the phone ringing and with Raylan looking really conflicted on whether he should answer or just let it ring.
Mm-hmm. But the other way this can end is with a sense of closure, which is just to say, we're ending the show, we're done with the character, we're done with the story now, but we're leaving it in such a way to say these characters are still out there. They're still doing their thing. Yeah. They're out there, and you know they're out there, and so it lives on in your mind. And in a sense, that's a kind of closure.
The big question at the end of this finale is, does Raylan answer the call and go chasing after Boyd, or does he ignore it and let Boyd be somebody else's problem? Does Raylan just not go back into action?
Yeah. That can go two different ways. Like I said, it can act as a setup for something else, or it can act as a kind of, like, these characters you love, they're still out there and they're still doing their own thing. And you can imagine the adventures they're having in your mind.
Well,
But we're done with them.
Exactly. Once you're done, like, that's an ending. The characters are still out there. Like, as long as they're still alive, as long as they're not killed off, then they still have lives beyond the story.
I think Justified is all about a messy story. So, like, interrupting the closure that the original season gave us of, like, you know, Raylan kind of going back and doing his own thing, and Boyd being in jail, and all these kind of things closed off, even though they're good in the season. At the same time, it's like, well, but now those characters aren't in play. Like, in our mind, that story is over. And in this sense, there's a type of closure in saying that we, the makers of this series, are now done with the show, but let it live on in your mind. And I think, like, it's like you said, the top spinning on Inception wasn't meant as a setup for a sequel. It was just meant to make you think and have that in your headspace. Like, there's never going to be a sequel to Inception. In the same sense, I don't think this was a plan for them to have another season of Justified, even though it kind of feels like it's set up for another season.
Yeah, I don't know what their plans are. This is billed as a limited series. I don't know if this was like
it's definitely not going to be City Primeval Season 2. It would be Justified something else.
Yeah, I don't know if this was a soft pitch for just another ongoing series or whatever, but like, they leave the door open at the end. It's not a definitive conclusion where it's like, Raylan's retired, we're not going to, like, get this character, like, as a marshal anymore. They leave the door open like, oh, but maybe if Boyd's involved, he might feel compelled to get sucked back in. If we get, it's, who knows?
But at the same time, to me, it felt like, but we're done with the show kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's what it kind of felt like to me. Maybe Raylan does go back, and maybe he does go after Boyd, and maybe there's a whole story there, but they're not bringing it to us. That's in your head now.
Not
you get to think
yet.
about that in your head.
Not yet, at least. That's the trick.
I don't think there's an intention for it. Like, I don't. Like, I don't think that's what I don't think they did that in the hopes of getting a new series.
Right.
I think they did that is to just say, your favorite characters are still up to no good, or still, like, there's still stuff going on, keep that in your headspace kind of thing. But who knows? Maybe they will do something else with it. Hopefully if they do, it's better than this 8-episode limited series turned out to be.
In the end, like, I felt it was decent. It just didn't blow me away, unfortunately.
Yeah. But that is it for our discussion of Justified City Primeval and our full spoiler segments. Next week, we are going to be talking about Season 5 of What We Do in the Shadows. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our website, thetotalscreen.com. If you go to thetotalscreen.com and open up the container story for any of our podcast episodes, scroll down to that last paragraph and you'll see all the links that you need for all all of our social accounts, the RSS feed for the podcast, the SoundCloud page, all of that's there. You can also check out our YouTube channel, which has all of our podcast episodes, our entire backlog, as well as other content, including our entire old podcast before this, The Weekly Set. So you can check out all of that if you want to. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the OnScreen podcast, the official podcast of The Little Screen. Visit our website at thetittlescreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.